Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today's such an interesting video, like my heartbeat is racing because I'm super excited to talk about today's topic and I get very interested when I talk about this, and I will dive a bit deeper on this concept of reciprocity and the elephant. As we talked about last time, the rider being the rational mind and the elephant is like the id and the instinctual um, self. So it's related to your emotions and gut feelings and your intuition, etc. But the person riding that elephant is more so your rational self, your consciousness, versus the elephant being the unconscious automatic thoughts and allow you to quickly react to situations reliably, versus the rider, which is controlling the path that the elephant takes, but is nevertheless not as powerful as the elephant. And so this is interesting, but the elephant always thinks it's right due to the self-serving bias, and we always find ways to justify ourselves. So what the elephant does, we think is always right, and we always justify our actions, our behaviors. And so Jonathan Haidt in his book talks about something called the myth of pure evil, and he says that this is the ultimate self-serving bias and the basis of something called naive realism, where both sides justify themselves and take on each other as people who disagree with us. For example, they don't see the world objectively and are irrational. So everybody thinks that they are right, and people who don't disagree with you must be irrational and must be wrong. So we pound on each other in this tit-for-tat mentality, but in this case, it's a special type of tit-for-tat mentality, as Jonathan Haidt puts it, where we both disagree with each other. And so anger feeds more anger, violence feeds more violence, and we just have a conflict. Both parties are fighting against each other. And Jonathan Haidt actually quoted a guy called Baumeister, who said that people do evil and violence rarely for personal gain out of greed, so robbery, and rarely because something called sadism, where you want and find pleasure in hurting others. No, it's not really because you want to steal something out of greed to have more materialistic possessions, and it's not really because you like to do bad to other people because you want to hurt them. No, it's more so to increase your self-esteem and for something called moral idealism, which we will talk about. So when we threaten one's self-esteem, people, especially young people, can become angry and even violent. They can lash out. So raising the self-esteem of children to high levels may not be a good idea. Instead, we want to increase skills, traits, and characteristics that they all will be proud of. Self-esteem is good, but not when it's to such a high state, because then you begin to question and retaliate everything that goes against what you believe. So if someone comes to you and questions what you believe in, you will get very angry and even violent. So we need to instead not be angry, but understand the other point's perspective. And I already talked about this concept in the 7 Habits in the previous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and also in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where you want to understand the other person's perspective and be in his shoes. So that's empathy, right? And really understand both sides of the story and both sides of the argument. So you want to consider all the facts, not just the facts that support your side, because people think that to be objective, those are the ones you need to look, and you expose those facts to everyone. But consider the facts and the evidence for both sides and look at the other person's perspective as well. Don't just get evidence for your case. Another thing we should do is to sometimes admit we are wrong. And that's actually the main idea of chapter 4 of Jonathan Haidt's book, which I'm kind of summarizing here. But so the main idea is to sometimes admit that we are wrong, and the other person will also reciprocate. And so last video we talked about the importance of reciprocity, And it's what brings societies together and help resolve conflicts. So it's a good thing. But not when tit-for-tat mentality goes in the wrong way and we lash out at each other because people don't agree with our perspective. And because we have the self-serving bias where we think people are irrational because they don't agree with us. No. Anger causes more anger. What we want is reciprocity in the good sense of reciprocity. We want to admit our mistake. We still get this Michelavian tit-for-tat mentality, but in this case, we admit our mistakes, so will the other person. And so you admit your mistakes. I know what I did made you feel a certain way. The other person will be like, well, I know how what I did was wrong too, and it must have made you feel Y, right? As like, or X, like a different way. And so people are kind of have this more soft, forgiving attitude towards each other when they begin to admit their mistakes. Right? Rather than always thinking that you are right. You may be, but instead of rushing to justify yourself, because we always want to justify the elephant, we also have to consider the other person's perspective and see that they may also be right. And we saw in How to Win Friends and Influence People, admitting you're wrong and recognizing that the other person may be right is very powerful in resolving conflicts. So it's so simple. Admit your mistakes and the other person will do the same. People match what you do. It's so simple. It helps resolve conflicts when you admit mistakes. People will return back the favor.